Agenda item number 8 is to discuss and approve relocating school committee meetings to Connors instead of Dingley for at least the summer to provide more space for all committee members and the public. Superintendent Lewiston.
Yeah, if I may. So a few things have gone on, obviously, as we've gone into the pandemic, but the meeting space from a facilities perspective at Dingley is quite tight, I would say, congested. And so there's a few benefits to meeting at Connors, which is why this topic has come up. One is just physical space, which is nice. Two is Facilities Director Josh Bro has informed me that the capacity of this building to move air in before and out during and out after has far more control than some of our other facilities. And so that's a benefit. In addition, I would say that our tech team has found a way to make these meetings as viable as I think they can with the equipment they currently have. And so while people can't see from here, there's 50 chairs in the gym side, on the other side of this space, that are socially distanced in the gym with a monitor so people can see what's happening in the meeting. We've set this space to have just under 50 capacity so that people can come in to speak at the podium and then return if they wish. And I'd also add that Dave's been working with numerous vendors to locate, plan, and get quotes on the equipment that might be necessary to have meetings that are a little more accessible to folks who could not be here. So he's doing that work. I want to thank him for that. It's an add-on right now to everything else he's already being asked to do. But he's the right guy to be looking into it. So for those different reasons, we thought it'd be a good idea to at least approve this so that for now we would have meetings here for those reasons, and then maybe a few others.
Ms. Wright?
I'd like to start a different vein of the conversation in terms of return. Sorry, here. In terms of possibly returning to Zoom practice, I think as we enter the start of the school season, we are going to see increased cases, and I think that might be the time to move back into a space that is safe for everyone. You know, folks can get a medical exemption from their workplace. They're concerned, you know, it's entirely possible that the right to participate in a public meeting supersedes the enforcement of a mask mandate. And I think we don't have clarity on that. And so in absence of clarity, I just advocate for the most safe reason and will absolutely acknowledge it's inconvenient and it's not perfect, but it's safe.
I agree with Member Ray on this point. I think that as we see what the City Council has done and the success that they've had with having meetings on Zoom, discussing all manner of topics, controversial topics, taking public comment on Zoom, receiving presentations on Zoom, that they're really a model for how we can do this and do it safely and do it in a way that maximizes accessibility. You know, I think there's every reason in the world for us to move back to Zoom and remain there as long as this public health emergency continues. In terms of the specific switch from Dingley to Connors, if the committee doesn't go for the proposal to go online, I'm comfortable with that, with the caveat that it's important that these meetings move back to Dingley when they can, for accessibility concerns for folks downtown. Dingley is a much more accessible building if you don't have access to a car than Connors is, and many of my constituents fall into that category. So my preference is for Ms. Ray's suggestion, and that's my perspective.
So I'm all right with here, except I did not hear half of what was said tonight, being all the way over here. And I'm not seeing any microphone that people can hold, and I don't know if that interferes with the situation. I don't know if that situation can improve so that we can, and I'm thinking if I'm not hearing, is the public not hearing at home, you know, so, yeah. And so I'm just wondering if there's something that we can do with that. And also, I'm sitting sideways, you know, looking at you guys, and I'm like, is there a better way to bring us socially distant apart, but being able to see you, superintendent, you know, other members, without having to do this. So the logistics of the place is a little ornery, but, you know, so if we can approve that, I'm all right with this meeting here. I'm kind of, you know, not much for the going online piece. The one thing I do think, though, I honestly don't think we'll ever get to a point where we can accommodate the public for a public hearing under these circumstances. And I think that we may need to take a look at an alternative, either it being strictly email or something with technology, because I think we've already been delayed on one major item. I think this is going to result in other delays, and I know, you know, I'm pretty sure public input is not mandatory anywhere. It's a policy decision by the governing body. So, I mean, certainly the public should input, but there's been items that I've read over 100 emails, so certainly they get through to us to be able to give us that input. And outside of that, I'm not really sure how public participation in person would work. So that's all I got.
Mark it in your calendar, I agree with Ron.
Wow.
I would have to say that I would like to see the meetings continue here. I feel like if we can't come to school board meetings with limited people, how do we expect our teachers to go and teach? So I would definitely like to continue this process.
I agree with Member Whitlow's point that if we can't meet safely in person, then we certainly can't expect teachers and students to go back to school safely. And I come to the conclusion that that means we can't send teachers and students back to school safely. I understand that's a subject for probably next week. But I would like to make a motion that we adopt Member Ray's suggestion and move our meetings back online consistent with what the City Council is doing.
I would second that.
Further discussion?
So, as the person who has chosen to engage in Zoom the most, I'd say, I will say the blended model does not work very well. And I know it's been suggested, so I'm just offering my opinion on that. I think it's also, so I will share personally, you know, I am likely to be medically accepted from going back to work, and then I come and show up to a school committee meeting. That's not really fair to my colleagues. And this, again, like, I will recognize Zoom is not convenient, but in the interest of public health, in the interest of, you know, we may have staff members who are asked to be at these meetings, and they may be coming from different counties, which have different statistics in terms of this health emergency. I could go on forever, and you all know that. So I strongly urge support of this, even though it does mean a real difference in the way we interact.
Can I ask Dave a question specifically?
Sure.
So with the blended model, I know we've had a few meetings where we've had some people live and in person, and the people who weren't comfortable being in person were able to remote in. What are the limitations of that? Why is that not an option?
So one of the things we've set up we got our new tech. We set up quite a system here tonight to make this work, and we saw that we were able to bring in Tony.
Right.
You know, that way, and you heard Tony and so forth. So it's really, do I want to stick my life on anything right now? No, but can I say that we made some inroads to maybe having some people be on Zoom and come into the meetings? Yes, it will. The limitation will be on what you want to present. Like, you have other speakers come in, right, who plugged in and they're on the screen, and then you have those people out there in Zoom land going, where's the presentation? I can't see it. So you would have to share the presentations through Zoom as well as a lot, to be able to show them. It's kind of a little bit of that. If we were gonna go to that kind of model, we'd have to do some training with the board to make sure that everybody was comfortable with that model as far as people making comments in Zoom sessions and so forth, bringing people in. So there's another step to that. The answer is, can we get there? Maybe. The other thing is, I would want to discuss, and then Jake may bring this up. We have a proposal by Headlight Audio Visual out of Portland to, if we want to pay $4,500, they'll come in and look at this and see if they can simplify it and make it a permanent or more permanent solution that's easily set up that can be done. But that will be costly too. Whatever they present to us could be costly.
Just for clarification, that dollar amount you just shared was to look at the space and plan, not to install it.
Absolutely. All that is to give us something that we can go out to RFP with if we wanted to. So that's kind of where we're at.
But just with the technology that you have going on tonight, you've improved upon it since the last time we had a blended meeting?
Oh, yes.
Okay, all right, that's good, that's helpful, thank you. Any other questions?
I guess my only question is around if we move to a Zoom format, are we saying that the Zoom format will allow for public participation, or are we saying that at this time we're going to do the best that we can for public participation because of the technological limitations? And I don't personally know the level of extent of participation using Zoom and how that gets moderated.
Is that a Dave question?
It involves somebody being, one of the things, if we go to the Zoom, and we go to a Zoom webinar, if we go to a Zoom webinar format, it would involve somebody on the board being the moderator to allow people to speak and not speak, that kind of thing. So somebody would have to have their laptop, we'd have to figure that piece out and configure it in, or somebody's actually doing that to allow people in and out as far as talking. And then again, you have to pre-plan to be able to share all your presentations on Zoom. So those are some of the hurdles of why I really think we would need a training to make sure that we were comfortable before we ever did it.
And that would be a strictly Zoom model, nobody in person at all, completely through Zoom?
That is
Or is that the blended model?
Well, the Zoom webinar, we could set up a camera like we did tonight to capture you guys in the room. And then that's, and then you guys are like, say, one group captured by one camera on Zoom, and then other people are coming in via Zoom from elsewhere. So it's a little work, but I would love to see what Headlight could do for us.
I just want to reiterate that the city council has been doing this since the beginning of the pandemic. It is baffling to me why we can't just copy what they're doing. There's nothing about the school committee that makes our deliberative process or our needs materially different from what the council is doing. And I don't understand
I can answer it quickly.
Okay, go ahead.
We did that research. I called Craig Starr at the city, said, what are you doing? Can I go over and see your city council chambers? The answer was this: they have not put two people in the same room since the start of COVID-19. So in other words, they're not doing this. What they're doing is the councilors are all coming in on their computers from home. Right? They're doing it all from home. So that's easy setup. There's no audio issues, there's no nothing. Everybody goes on the computer from home. People can come in via the webinar. You moderate it, piece of cake. That's easy, if that's the route we want to go. But that's not a hybrid approach. That's just straight up Zoom webinar.
Right. So to be clear, exactly modeling the city's format, which they've used to tackle innumerable issues over many meetings with public comment and participation from staff members, from the superintendent, in fact, on several occasions, would be easy.
Well, a lot easier for me. I'll do what you want me to do, obviously. Clearly that's an easy setup.
It sounds like Dave might also be signaling someone to moderate that process, and I would happily volunteer myself as a Zoom super user in my everyday life. I think, and also just to say, that would not be a political position. We've had some people with hands raised on the city council example. that the mayor has just missed because he's trying to coordinate it all. I would not recommend that the chair do it, but I think, yeah, everyone can be allowed in very carefully, and also Zoom is not just a computer internet platform. Just for everyone's knowledge, there's also phone-in, dial-in information. And so when we're talking about accessibility of internet, we don't have to worry as much about that. They're going to miss out on the live presentation, but that's an opportunity that I think hasn't been publicized as much. Obviously, super passionate and want to make this work. But my other thing, and maybe there is an issue with this, is if everyone gets a pair of headphones and you still want to all come together and plug in sitting next to each other, you know, Ryan can webcam in, I can webcam in, and we can still have whatever you all are looking for in the personal space, but just exposure to beyond these 10, 12, 15 people in this room is very different of an ask, I think, so.
I gotta say it, you know, we're a public body. We're established by charter. We act together as representatives of the people. We have a state CDC that allows us to meet, allows anybody to meet in groups of 50. So obviously they must have some science and technology that says this isn't a problem. We're all wearing masks. Doesn't seem to be a problem. I think that as a governing body, we have to meet together. I actually have heard more from constituents wondering why the city council isn't meeting together as a council so that they can show up and weigh in on some of these decisions that the city council have been doing. So, you know, it's both sides of the city, you know, seeing this. And I think I'm going by what the governor's thrown out. I'm going out what CDC's thrown out. We can meet in groups of 50. If we had a restriction of 10 people, okay, I give in, just like I did in the start of this. We can meet in 50, we're wearing masks, we can do an alternative to allow public comment. So I just think that we're a governing body, and we should step up to do that. And you know, if we're gonna go online, well, why ever bother coming back in public? Just stay permanently online. I mean, that seems to be the thing of the future, technology, right? So there's a reason why we meet together as human beings face to face. So that's all I get.
Mr. Maduros-Collins?
I want to respond to some of Member Hawkins' concerns because I think they're valid. I think that it is an inherent degradation of democracy to conduct public business online, but I also think that it is inherent degradation of democracy to limit public accessibility to meetings. And so, you know, what you're suggesting as an option, what it sounds like is we keep meeting in person and the public isn't really welcome. There's a compelling argument for that from a public health standpoint. What myself and Member Ray are suggesting is that we meet online and the public is welcome. There's a compelling argument for that from a public health standpoint. I think that you can go with either of those models and have concerns about the representativeness of that, and none of this is ideal. But what I find to be not acceptable is continuing to meet in person with the possibility that we will have large numbers of members of the public turn out, and then, you know, a cherry on top of that, using the fact that we might have large numbers of members of the public turn out as an excuse not to talk about things. So you know, in my view, something has to change about what we're doing. Maybe your proposal is what the committee wants to do and say, members of the public, we'll see you online. But I might support that, but I want to start with the one that we've got here.
Mr. Donovan?
I just don't get the issue with the Zoom. It's super easy, it's super safe, it protects all of us, it does the best, you know, and I think it's the best thing for the community, for us, ourselves individually. I feel bad for Alicia getting an exemption. I mean, on a personal element, I feel bad for Alicia getting an exemption from work and then having to be forced to come in here. That's not really fair to anybody. But there's a concern here where our constituents downtown can't get here, that's an obvious concern. If our two choices are Zoom and here, I mean, Zoom is, I just don't, it's a no-brainer. That's just my opinion.
I just want to, sorry, I want to ask you a question. I'm just trying to find a middle ground here. So is with us, are you cool with us being in the space? Or is it kind of like if there's a bunch of public people coming from different places? I'm just trying to see if I can come to some middle ground here.
Is that okay, Madam Chair? Okay, so I think we are about to debate within a week if we are bringing everyone back or not. And I would hazard a guess that the extrapolation of this conversation will come to next week as well. There's a right to public process. However, the state legislature has made an exception that business can be conducted digitally when appropriate, and I think we can't just guess from meeting to meeting whether or not there's going to be a lot of public participation and also staffing needs. I think it would be undue burden to Superintendent Lewis to say, tell us who's going to be there and we'll make determinations if we show up or not. We got someone coming in from Cumberland County and, they have a higher incidence or whatever it is. And so I understand the want to find a neutral ground or a common ground here, but I think it's positive or negative. And if we go through this process and the vote happens and meetings are happening here, I will be here. I've come to meetings when I've been asked to be in person, and I think, you can say we were elected to serve the public, but we were not elected to put ourselves at risk of a deadly pandemic flu. And that is what some of us are doing each time they leave their house.
I think a good middle ground is what we've done in the past, and hearing that has been approved upon, where it's a blended model. I know we're talking about doing a blended model for our students returning to school, and so it seems appropriate that we would do a blended model for this as well. And then members who don't feel comfortable coming in would be able to come in via video, and then people who are comfortable could be here in person. As somebody who has a learning disability, the online platform is very difficult for me. I struggled when we were doing it. I did it because it was necessary at the time, but that is very difficult for me. So going back to that would be really hard for me, but I also respect that there's health concerns for the potential of exposure. So I think that the blended model where there are some people at home coming in via video and some people live and in person seems like the best compromise because it meets all of the needs. Nobody's forced to come in, and nobody's forced to do the online platform either.
The blended model may or may not work for members. I mean, the one person who's used it more than anyone else, Member Ray, chose not to continue using it because it was so inaccessible. But maybe it's improved, and that's great. But that doesn't address the question of members of the public attending these meetings. And, Member Potvin makes a point about the number of people gathering. And 10 people, 15 people is pretty safe. But if we're dealing with restrictions of 50, and we're taking up issues of significance that generate a lot of public interest, and we all recognize that there are members of the public who are not responsibly following the guidelines from the government, whether that's on masks or it's on distancing or hand washing or anything else. The proposal that is to continue doing what we're doing or to do a hybrid model doesn't grapple with that at all. And the solution so far has been to just not take up anything that has the potential to generate a large amount of public interest, which is simply not tenable for a public deliberative body to just avoid taking up issues because we're afraid members of the public might show up to talk about them. So the hybrid model is not a real option unless we deal with the fact that we're going to have a way for members of the public to participate without filling this place with people who may or may not be participating in masking, in cleaning their hands, in staying away from each other, in, to me, dealing with all the issues that we're going to be dealing with over the next few months, it's obvious that it's safer for the public to do that via Zoom. Now, maybe the committee wants to go with Member Potman's idea of just saying, members of the public aren't welcome.
I'm not sure that anybody has said members of the public aren't welcome.
I think you
I'm pretty sure that no one has said that at all.
I mean, Ron, is that more or less what you're saying?
What I said was that I don't think in today's world as we're living in it today,
Yeah,
we can come up with a solution to figure out how hundreds of people can show up at a meeting for deliberation. And that public input is not a mandatory piece to a governing body. So we can put restrictions on it, whereas we've heard so much about, in the SRO,
Sure.
over 100 communications.
right.
People know how to communicate with us. If they have issues, they can communicate through that. I think giving the public the opportunity to communicate is important.
Right.
We have to live with our reality of today, that we've been working this now, 4 months? And we're no closer today than we were 4 months ago. We're
Right.
trying to figure out how to run these meetings and have public participation. And I'm just thinking, we're at a point with a governing body that you can't have the public participation. I view us together doing the legal
Yeah.
meat of the deliberation to be face-to-face and together, a separate item. So I see it that there's a constitutional piece to it that we need to do this. As long as the governor says we can meet 50, she brings it down to 10, okay, I'm
Right.
back on Zoom. I get
Right,
it.
sure.
But as far as the public goes, I'm looking to allow the public as much, and I'm not sure if just Zoom is it. There's been other talks about, there's other different ways to bring the public in.
Yeah.
If there is, to be able to use technology to do that piece while we
Right.
meet together as a body. So that was my direction. I really think we're at a standstill of being able to bring people here in mass to discuss things, so.
So I guess my question for the chair is, assuming that a blended model would work for the specific members of the school committee and the top level district administrators who are at all of these meetings assisting us, how does that interact with public participation?
So I'm not an IT person, I don't know all of the technology pieces that Dave knows, but it seems to me, things that I've done in agencies outside of those public schools, that the Zoom platform could be broadcasting from here, which allows up to 500 people, members of the community, to call in, phone in, video in, whatever they want, and members who want to be at home could also come in through that platform, and the rest of us could be here, using that same platform. There doesn't seem to be a reason why that couldn't happen today.
So is your suggestion then that the only people who would be meeting in person are the members of the committee? And that the public would be able to access committee meetings via the computer or by phone?
Or the way we have it set up tonight with 50 overflow room. So some people, if people wanted to come in and speak in person, they could come in and speak in person. If people wanted to come in the 500 overflow through the Zoom platform, that allows up to 500 people. I know that there's been some conversation that this school is hardwired with speakers and audio, everything to go outside, so we could line people up outside and they could participate outside. We have a lot of technology in the school, it's a brand new school,
Okay, so-
and there's other options to utilize.
So how do we address compliance with public health guidelines among members of the public attending the meetings?
The same way we did tonight.
Nobody was violating public health guidelines, and everyone participated in a way that was responsible. What happens when someone doesn't?
I don't have those answers, I'm not sure. But,
That strikes me as a key flaw in the suggestion that you're making.
well, there's always gonna be flaws. None of this is ever going to be perfect and flawless. It's the nature of what it is. But allowing the most accessibility so people can talk in person if they want to talk in person. They can email if they want to email. They can call if they want to call. They can video if they want to video. Opening up as many options as possible is the best that we can do. And then there will be flaws, and there will be what happens and what ifs, and then we'll have to encounter those when they come up. But if the concern today is that certain members don't want to meet in person, and other members do want to meet in person, it seems like the most accessible option is the blended option that allows for some members to meet in person, some members to meet remotely, and then it still allows public participation. It covers all of the bases in the best possible way. Ms. Whitlow, you had something?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, you did also.
Okay, yeah, Linnea, you're more than welcome to speak.
So earlier this afternoon, I was in a Zoom webinar with Housing and Urban Development in Washington DC with over 250 participants. And any of us could have spoken up at any time. I don't see why we can't go ahead and move our meetings here for those who want to attend in person, keep things as they are, put something in the newspaper or send something to the news. The Lewiston School Department will be having in-person meetings at Connors Elementary under these conditions. Masks will be worn, social distancing will be required. If you cannot meet these conditions, Zoom in or call. That's simple. I don't understand why this needs to turn into such a drama fest. Clearly, a blended situation will work. We just have to be willing to let it work. We just need to make the expectations clear and then I don't know whether we need to have a Lewiston officer or one of our SROs here when people come in, just to remind them, okay, make sure you keep your mask on, there's sanitizer right there, make sure you maintain your distance. I don't know, but it's not like we have to cut, it doesn't have to be either or, we have a whole lot of options. We should use them and stop arguing about whose idea is best. The idea is what matters, not where it's coming from.
Yeah, I have a comment. Okay. I just don't know when the discussion moved from, for this district, accessibility for all, and then all of a sudden now it's, we don't want accessibility for all, which like the in-person. So I don't know why we even had the discussion. I think that this district needs to have several ways for people to communicate when we have such an issue with internet access for those in the downtown area. I would think that only online would not be the way to go, unless, like Ron said, that we see these requirements for 10 people or less. So that's where I stand.
Ms. Wright?
Just two final thoughts. So the first is, one of my main concerns is if someone in this room right now, as a member who needs to be here or a staff who needs to be here, has an asymptomatic COVID-19 positive test, how we help them participate fully without them having to disclose medical information about themselves, which I have chosen to do in this meeting, but I realize not everyone's not comfortable doing. So I just hope folks will reflect on that. And then the second part is, I get the sense that disagreements are not welcome on this body right now, and I understand working towards compromise. The way this process works, in my perspective, is we have a motion on the table. People should, if they're passionate about it, debate and make their case. I just want to be very clear. I will do as the deliberative body decides, and I hope every member will, and I hope people just really think before their vote. That's all, and we'll abide by whatever that is. I mean, that's the way this process is supposed to work, in my opinion.
Whatever we decide, I mean, we can always, again, see if it works. If it doesn't work, we can just kind of circle back and have a discussion again. So it's not the absolute all end all be all. So I think we should come up with something that's suitable for now. Once we come up with it, let's just throw it down a couple months down the line to see how it worked, reassess it, and then if it needs to be tweaked, then we just tweak it.
I call the question.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. So there's a motion on the table, brought up by Member McGinnis Collins, seconded by Ms. Ray, and the motion is to return to online meetings.
All in favor? Opposed? And abstaining?
Yeah, I'm abstaining.
Ryan, one abstaining. Oh, opposed? 2, 3, 4. And you're abstaining.
Your vote was 252.
And who's in,
Donovan and Hawkins. I'll find as your first name. Does anyone want to make another motion to discuss the relocating to Connors, which is the agenda item?
So I will motion that we move the in-person meetings from the Dingley building to Connors.
I would second that.
Is that all?
And that we include a blended ability. I don't know why that needs to be so hard, but have it be a blended meeting as well.
Dingley to Connors and a blended option.
Yes.
That's up to that.
Are you requesting a friendly amendment?
I am,
Okay,
sorry, I don't know exactly.
that's okay.
Terminology, but, that we see how that works in the next couple of months, and then we assess it from
Are you okay with that?
Do you second?
I'm withdrawing my second because she wanted to add more after, so if anyone else would like to second that.
I'll second.
I want to offer another amendment, hopefully friendly, that we specify that the meetings at Connors expire on October 1st, and without action from the committee, we revert to meeting at Dingley.
You know, it's been brought up that there's possibility of resurgence of diagnoses coming. I don't know that putting a cap on it and then putting us back at Dingley.
We can always extend it, but my purpose in offering this amendment is to ensure that whenever we are able to return to fully or semi-fully normal meetings, that they are held at Dingley. That's very important. So
Right, so maybe not a time frame, but just when we can resume meetings, they should return to Dingley.
Can I ask a
Without a
question?
time frame.
Well, it has to be more, I would want it to be more specific than that. I mean, at the end, at the end of the public health emergency or something like that.
Okay,
That's fine.
rather than a specific date.
Yeah.
Should I be friendly with that? And I'll do.
So I just want to make sure, so I'm clarifying that, will we still be using the blend model even if we move back to Dingley? I just want to clarify.
Well, if we move back to Dingley, under the amendment that I just offered, it would be after the public emergency is over.
Okay.
So it wouldn't be overwhelmingly relevant.
Okay, and then are you okay with the amendment?
Yeah,
Because you're the second.
yeah.
Okay, do you have all that, Dave? Okay.
Hang in there, Jake. We have faith in you.
Just for the, when would we revisit this? Did you give a date or a date?
I think it was a specific date.
Okay.
We could say, no one has any issues, December 1st.
What is the motion?
Okay, so if that's here's what I have so far. The second motion is to move the current meetings to Dingley, to Connors from Dingley, and use a blended format with a friendly amendment to revisit this on December 1st, and also a second friendly amendment that after public emergency, we return to Dingley.
There's two motions?
No, that's her motion with the friendly amendments added.
So what is the,
So the motion is to move meetings to here
yeah, but the December 1st.
until December 1st. With,
Revisit it on December 1st to see if we want to continue at here or back at Connors.
Back at
I
Dingley.
mean, back at Dingley.
with the caveat that if the public emergency is lifted, we return our meetings to Dingley.
Did the blend model get left out?
Nope, that
Oh,
was
that's in there too.
move the meetings to here as a blended model.
Bruce?
I guess my concern about some of this is that in the event that we have gone back to school, doesn't that put an undue burden on facilities to get this room cleaned up from 3 o'clock until 6 o'clock after the kids have left? I mean, to sanitize this particular room for these meetings? Because you're gonna, if the kids are back, you're gonna have a very you have the potential for having an extremely contaminated site. And I would be concerned about the ability, I mean, I'm not questioning their ability to do it. I'm just thinking it's adding a significant burden to their already workload to try to, you know, this thing has to be done. And if we're going to have folks in the gym, the same thing holds true there. Now you have two large rooms in this building that would have to be re-sanitized significantly in about a 3-hour space of time. I would be concerned about that piece of it, I guess, is you know, and again, you know, if we were meeting Wednesday night after they had all day Wednesday to sanitize the building, that would be a different story. But I think that because we're always Monday night, and Monday is the first day back from one of the cohort A, and the number of kids that are here, if it happens, I mean, I would be concerned about the condition of these two rooms and the entrance.
Was it a shortened day? Is that what it was proposed? Karen, maybe?
I'm sorry?
At some point in your presentation, you said something about it being a shortened day, sort of like the half-day Wednesday, or
So this,
would they be here in school until 3, like they traditionally were?
not if we go with the hybrid model, it would be an earlier release, but Wednesday would be a complete remote day for everybody.
And if I may, the original item on the agenda was to have these meetings here at least during the summer, for the way. And so that language about summer, I think, had much to do with your point, Mr. David, that I do think this is an ask of facilities to prep this space, set it up. I would actually say these tables came from the Dingley building today, as well as the rest of the unit do this. The other thing I don't want to go without mentioning, because my first question, regardless of what's decided, is what's the feasibility? We've got 2 guys over there right now who are not scheduled to be working, who not only did this, but spent hours before we got here making sure it was up and ready to run and follow through to make sure it's live streamed. So I'd be curious about their time and their commitment. But also, as Dave mentioned earlier, he's looking at proposals to come in and look at the space to see how to make it, what it is we want to do with it from an accessibility standpoint. We don't have that yet. He's doing a lot of work on it, but it still doesn't exist. So if the blended model is Zoom, I guess I want to be clear that as superintendent, I can carry out the motion to effectively do what's being asked.
Karen?
I agree with Member Damon's concerns, and obviously in addition to the 2 rooms, we're also talking about bathrooms, we're talking about an entranceway, we're talking about handrails and all sorts of things. You know, that given the committee's prior vote, it's very hard to know whether, with all those considerations, Connors is really a reasonable ask starting at the beginning of the school year, if the kids are back in person, which obviously we haven't decided yet. But I don't know, I share your concerns.
Madam Mayor, move the motion and a call for a roll call vote.
Does that have to go 1 through 7?
1 through 7, at-large city council representative.
Representative from Ward 1? That's you, Bruce.
Yeah, I know, I'm just trying to,
Sorry.
the motion again, just as it stands.
The motion as it stands currently is to move the meetings from Dingley to Connors in a blended format that we will revisit December 1st. And once the emergency order has been lifted, we return meetings to Dingley.
Are you saying December or September?
December.
Thank you.
Sorry. It's the mask.
It's okay.
12-1,
Yes.
yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
4?
No.
5?
Yes.
6,
Yes.
7,
Yes.
at large, yes, and city council rep.
No.
Motion passes 7-2. Agenda item number 9, to act upon the selection of a school committee chairperson. So it is my understanding that some committee members disagree with the usual process that we use for midterm selection of a chair. So I'd like to give anyone who wishes the opportunity to speak on this. Ms. Wright?
So I would like to suggest that a nominating process is used for this procedure tonight. I think there are some unfortunate backstories here where the vice chair is to be appointed by the chair and then voted upon by the school committee. And then the vice chair serves as the acting chair when the chair cannot be there. And so we find ourselves in an odd situation right now where I believe that we should follow standard nominating and voting procedure to select the school committee chairperson. I'm happy to enumerate what that would look like. I believe it would be soliciting nominations, closing nominations, remarks, and then a vote on that process, or a vote on that just done procedure. And yeah, I just think the rules and the selection should follow that format.
And just for clarification, that's the format that we usually follow during inauguration.
Yes, so inauguration usually has the benefit of, there's usually a meeting about a few weeks beforehand in which it's kind of discussed who's interested. And of course, no vote can be taken because not all members are sworn in. It's just so that we look probably more coordinated on the inaugural stage that's discussed in that manner. And so I think this should be a very public process. So that was my statement.
And that, if that's the process we're gonna do, then I would nominate Megan Parks to be chair.
Second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Point of order. So
That's not the process.
with respect, that's exactly the opposite of the process that Member Wright just laid out. It seems to me that there ought to be a nominating process and an actual election where people are voting for a candidate or not, or a candidate or an alternative candidate or abstaining. But it seems like that there's a conflict between what the acting chair sees as the process and what the parliamentarian sees as the process, and it would strike me as appropriate for the committee as a whole to make a decision about what process it would like to use.
So historically speaking, the process that Ms. Ray is suggesting is only used during the inauguration process when new members are coming on. And the reason that process is used at that time, like she said, is because the incoming members who have been voted by the community but have not been sworn in yet are not sworn in yet. So they cannot participate in a process such as the one that's used at the midterm process. So historically speaking, as far back as I can find any records for, if the school board chair has left in the middle of the term that they were appointed for, or in the January cycle in the second year of the nomination, the process that has been used every single time has been this process of it's an agenda item and a motion is made. If there's a second, that is voted on. If that vote fails, then there's the opportunity for there to be a second motion. If not, then that's the way the agenda items have always been in this regard.
I'm just curious, because I tried to grab notes here, I feel like I heard Bruce make a motion and have a second, and I don't know what that stands for.
There's an active motion on the table. Ms. Wright?
I think that is fine if that's what the whole body wants to do as a procedure, but I think it predicates, who names the name fastest. not a true process of nominations, discussion of qualifications. I have the reference because of course I do, this should surprise literally no one, that the process I was suggesting and prescribing from my seat is that when an election is pending, we determine the method of making nominations. Nominations are accepted, nominations are closed, and then we make decisions from there. I appreciate that what members are trying to do right now, but I think the process should be different, and so that is the effort we're discussing right now.
So I want to offer a couple of comments in that it may be the case that the school committee in the last few years has used this method, but it would put the school committee wholly at odds with all established parliamentary procedure in the United States and abroad. And so to that end, I would offer an amendment to Mr. Damon's motion to strip the language nominating Megan Parks for chair and instead replace it with a school a motion to conduct an electoral process to determine the school committee chair.
Bruce would have to agree with it, and then Tammy would also have to agree with it.
Or I didn't anticipate it being a particularly friendly amendment. No offense, Bruce. But I just want the committee to vote on this, and so if someone offers a second, then.
Well, in my mind, if there are other nominations, I nominated Megan, right? If we vote on it and that fails, then we offer somebody else. I mean, it's as simple as that. I mean, if there's not a consensus on the board that is appropriate, then someone else can offer a different name of nomination. I don't see why that isn't exactly how it would be done.
So,
It's not an election.
So are you making a motion for an
point of
amendment?
order?
Yeah, point of order.
Basically, the question is, do we vote on names one by one, yes or no? Or do we solicit all the names and then everyone picks a name? And then whatever process we're using, rank choice or whatever, with an election or a confirmation.
That's for sure.
So
What's
the
that?
word election shouldn't even be used. If we want to follow like the policy and procedure and the charter say there's no, the word election isn't in there. So you're pushing for what you feel is an election process, and this isn't even supposed to be an election process.
It
It's a
absolutely
nomination
is.
process.
It
and
absolutely
that's
is an
what's
election
happening.
process.
So were you offering an amendment because that takes precedent over the main motion? and we
Yes,
have to
I
debate
did
that
offer an amendment,
first?
but I'm unaware that it was seconded.
What was it?
Second. Second.
Thank you.
Bruce, do you accept his amendment?
No.
Tammy, do you accept his amendment? No.
It does not, it takes precedent as a side motion now. So now that's what's up for debate is, I don't even know what the amendment is still.
The amendment was to replace the language of Bruce's motion, or Member Damon's motion, with the school committee committing to an electoral process consistent with Robert's rules and all established parliamentary procedure.
All in favor?
There has to be discussion.
I thought we just had a discussion on
No, it
After a second.
just got seconded.
it. Discussion? Ms. Ryder?
Sorry to cut you off. Again, looking at our rules of order, you all know I'm very into process, and I think process smooths out a lot of this. Again, there is a disagreement as it would appear by conversation, and again, we will vote up and down and move on from that. I believe the amendment by substitution is appropriate.
Mr. Donovan?
I don't see how, well, I guess there's a debate on whether or not we should even have an election, and I don't understand that. But it wouldn't be an election to have someone be nominated, we vote on them, and then what if they passed? So then, it's done. So that's not an election, that's not fair. If there's more people on the table that want to, because it's just whoever's first, and what if they passed, then.
So to clarify some of that, the wording of the procedural rules states that in the absence of a chair, the vice chair is falls into the position of chair. And that I don't believe anyone has argued. What the argument has been in side conversations that have inappropriately been happening outside of this room, is that the charter then negates the procedural rules. The wording in the charter is very vague, and it says in the absence of a chair, that the body would then appoint a chair. But since the procedural rules appoints the vice chair into the chair position, there's arguably no absence to be filled at all, which would negate this entire process, which means we don't even have to be having this conversation, but for the fact that certain people are trying to push it for their own personal agendas. Mr. Juris-Collins?
I find a lot of what you just said deeply inappropriate.
I agree.
And I think that it is outrageous that members of the school committee would be trying to prevent the school committee from selecting its own chair.
Who is trying to prevent anything, for clarification?
The process you just laid out
No,
was
so the fact that this
suggesting.
is on the agenda when it isn't, when many members believe that it doesn't even need to be on the agenda, shows that we're not trying to prevent anything.
Then
fact
why
that
did we just hear?
Excuse me, the fact that I.
Well, hold on, I have the floor. I have the floor. So, I'll address a question to you. Why did we just hear a litany of what I consider to be deeply inappropriate comments, to the extent that that this was an unnecessary item to have on the agenda? And I guess my follow-up question is, if the chair believes that it's an unnecessary item to have on the agenda, then why is it on the agenda? And if the chair doesn't believe it, then why did the chair just say it?
So I was responding to Member Donovan's question about whether or not there was, whether or not this was a necessary vote, and I was explaining why this isn't actually a necessary vote. And then to answer your question, I don't think it's necessary, and many other people have agreed that it's not necessary, but we put it on the agenda in order to have transparency for this process.
Clarification question.
Yes, Mr.
A clarification would take.
Go ahead, Adam.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Next.
Yeah, when you say we, who's we?
When I said we in which,
You said we decided to put it on the agenda.
that would be Jake and I.
Okay.
So through all the dialogue back and forth, and again, I'm kind of the new kid on the block, can you break down in kind of simple terms, I'm not familiar with a lot of the rules, can you just kind of suggest, tell me what you're, basically what you're saying?
Yes. So I have an amendment pending on Member Damon's motion.
Yeah.
Member Damon's motion is to appoint Megan Marks as the school committee chair. My amendment would replace the content of his motion with the school committee deciding to have an electoral process and instructing the chair to conduct an electoral process. So what this basically boils down to is a question as to whether the school committee believes we should conduct this process by nomination and confirmation as has been laid out by the chair, or if we should conduct this process through an electoral process as it consistent with Robert's rules and has been laid out by the parliamentarian.
So when you say electoral process, is that when you just say, hey, whoever wants to be chair or whatever?
Yeah, so,
And then we say, okay, we want you, blah, blah, blah.
so basically the question is, if the chair's suggestion prevails, that we would have an up or down vote on a particular individual with no consideration of other individuals until and unless that first individual failed to be confirmed. If an electoral process was presented, it would allow multiple members in theory to present themselves as candidates for the position, to make remarks, and then for members on the body to choose between candidates. Of course.
I believe that process already happened via email over the weekend, when other members who were interested in being considered sent out an email explaining that they were asking to be considered.
Point of order. Whatever communications did or did not go out over email this weekend don't have standing on the school committee, and so that process absolutely did not happen over the weekend.
Madam Chair.
Any other discussion? Mr. Palmer?
So hearing both sides in this, we have on the agenda here, given to the public, a decision to select a school chairperson. We have a process that's been followed. There may be disagreement about that process. The discussion about process is nowhere on this agenda. I did not hear the rules suspended. It came out of the clear blue. I think it's inappropriate to have that discussion now. Now, we'll just finish walking through this. You're asking to do something which basically sets other committee members for failure. If you have a motion and a majority selects, I don't understand the purpose of having two other candidates go down in flames. I don't see the point. I mean, and I think, and again, I'll refer to my knowledge of 3 school committees, 3 different communities, all doing the same thing the same way. That you initiate a process, and that process succeeds or fails. So I think it eventually gets to what you want to do. You guys want to try to create a different, I think that's something that is a topic of discussion at a workshop, at a retreat, something to hammer out, not with what we presently have, that we've told the public what we're going to do, and we're operating under that, so.
So I have a point of order. And I would start with clarification from the parliamentarian as to whether the method of selecting a school committee chairperson falls within the purview of agenda item 9 in her view.
Acting upon the selection would include a method which is also prescribed here. Method is not described in procedural rules or charter.
Okay. So I would contend, Member Potvin, that my amendment that's been offered is wholly consistent with the agenda item that we're considering. With regard to your argument on the merits, I can see the value of it. I obviously do it from perspective, but I think that it's important that the school committee decide which process it wants to use. And it's totally appropriate if the majority of the school committee wants to conduct an up or down vote on an individual and then conduct a subsequent up or down vote if that individual is unsuccessful, then that's a process that the school committee should choose to use. If the school committee wants to use an electoral process, then the school committee should choose to use an electoral process. But so I mean, I don't begrudge your point of view. I see it. I don't wholly agree, but I think it has some merit. And that's that's.
Yeah, so I find that us even having to vote is super controversial. I want to just pose this question to the board. You know, we did have Megan as a vice chair. Whether it was recorded or not, pretty sure we voted.
Point of order.
We're in discussion.
No, I just.
It takes precedent.
It's a clarification.
He's making a lot of precedented motions,
Well, I would
which
just like to talk.
I get it.
For
All
goodness
right.
sakes. So I feel like, and I could be wrong, but I thought we voted for Megan to be vice chair at our retreat, that first retreat that we had in January, and I believe it was January 27th. It wasn't recorded, but I feel like we did, and I don't know if anybody remembers that. Now, why would we have a vice chair? So that if something happened to the chair, that somebody could step up and make a smooth transition. Let's think about what we just did with the assistant superintendent. We thought it was extremely important to have somebody in that second person in line, so that if something was to happen to the person in charge, that a smooth transition could happen. Now, with all of this taking place, with the loss of the superintendent, the chair resigning, I just find that keeping the consistency right now for another 4.5 months until January comes, then we can do another vote. It just makes more sense. We elect a new chair every year, and that could be a process.
Point of order now.
Sure.
I didn't want to. I appreciate Member Whitlow's acknowledgement that we elect a new chair every year. and I think that's important for everyone to note. And I would say that the school committee orientation workshop on January 11th did not include a vote to confirm the vice chair, which was something I was totally comfortable with. The former chair, Roy, asked the school committee rather informally if we wanted to have a vote on her nomination of Megan Parks to serve as vice chair. Myself, Member Ray, and potentially others, but I'm not sure, indicated that we didn't feel that was necessary. That certainly could be construed as an endorsement of the choice. I wouldn't necessarily take that interpretation. I would take the interpretation that we felt it was the chair's prerogative to select the vice chair that they wanted, which is the position that I would stand behind today. But I do think it's important to recognize the difference between an appointed vice chair and an elected chair. And I just think that those are two different things, and it's important to have a process tonight. So I guess I'd call the question on my amendment vote, which I'm happy to remind people of if anyone needs it.
Call the question, the amendment to restrict Member Damon's statement and use an electoral process to select a school committee chair.
All in favor?
Oh, wait.
This is on my
Okay.
amendment.
This is on the amendment.
Opposed?
Abstain.
Abstain.
What were your vote counts?
4-4-1.
So the amendment fails.
The amendment fails. You need a 5 in the affirmative or negative.
Can I make a comment completely off subject before we go much farther?
Can I just quickly record who was a no vote? Who was not voting?
Whitlow, Parks,
Hoffman, Davis.
Damon, Houghton.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if people are able to look at this objectively, but if people are watching this video right now, the devolution, the way this conversation has devolved, yeah, that would be why there was so much scuttlebutt and drama and whatnot online about people not having any faith in us. I think we all need to work on reining in our personal grudges and our personal agendas and focus on our work, because that is ultimately what's important. I agree with Kiernan's comment that an elected chair is very different from an appointed vice chair. That's just my personal feelings about it. End of the day, we need to get this done and move along because we have other things to do tonight. That said, let's do this.
Ms. Rice? So can I clarify the motion now on the table with the defeating?
Defeated the amendment.
Defeat.
Defeat.
Defeat the
Thank you. Someone for giving me that. Is that Member Parks to become chair?
Motion by Mr. Damon, second by Ms. Wood.
Okay. All I will say is I firmly believe in an open process and a nomination process at all levels. And I have a feeling that this is going to be the last bit of discussion on this. And so I think there are many skill sets on this committee, and not knowing who else might have been interested in this role with an open process will narrow the opportunities for appointing a vice chair at the end of this process, in my opinion. I think as Member Whitlow argued successfully based on that vote, you know, there's a process here that prepares or is intended to prepare the vice chair for acting in the chair's role. And although I agree with the process by which we'll be doing this, I think there's an importance of understanding what everyone around the table is thinking.
Mr. Ramirez-Collins?
I think that it's, I want to echo some of Member Hawkins' comments and emphasize the fact that some of the discussion tonight was not conducive to a open and fair deliberative process for the school committee, was not conducive to restoring the public's faith in the school committee, and I found that to be very disheartening, and it will inform my vote. But I want to be clear that I'm looking forward to working with whoever our permanent chair is from now until the end of December. And I think that it's really important that everyone on this committee commit to respecting the process, commit to respecting the outcome, and staying in this and continuing to work together for the benefit of our students and our community. So those are my comments.
Madam Chair, move the motion, and I ask for a roll call vote.
Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2,
Yes.
Ward 3,
No.
Ward 4,
Yes.
Ward 5,
No.
Ward 6,
Yes.
Ward 7,
No.
at large, yes, and City Councilor Wright.
No.
Motion carries 5-3. Motion passes 5-3.
5-4.
Excuse me, 5-4.
Nine.
That's why I stressed that one count.
Agenda item number 10, report from City Council Representative.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We've had quite a number of meetings since we've last had our regular school committee business meeting. I did want to draw your attention to, in case you have not heard it before, July 7th, there was a meeting in which, under other business, it was, there were motions made and withdrawn, but a discussion of our process with the school resource officers was taken up. It sounded like members might want to weigh in as a council, as a deliberative body. I know you all have seen that the mayor has weighed in, but I argued that that process should not happen, that the school committee should be allowed to make its deliberations on its own, and so the motions were withdrawn. It does sound like, and I did encourage individual counselors to reach out to their counterparts, so you may be hearing from them, you may have already heard from them, but I felt it was important to maintain especially my integrity as a person who votes on both bodies and has equal standing on both bodies, and the fact that it's our deliberation to have. So just wanted to inform you all of that. The other stuff that we've been talking about recently, the Lewiston Recreation reopening and planning discussion. Our recreation director, Jason Hankin, has really great ideas for how we're going to do that safely. And so a lot of their information is up on their website as well. And then, of course, on July 21st, Ward 2 representative to the school committee was appointed and confirmed with a unanimous vote. So I just wanted to welcome Mr. Bizik.
Agenda item number 11, report from the interim superintendent.
Just a quick report for me. I think, as everyone could tell tonight from our agenda and workshop, that we are as focused as we can be with all of our resources on opening school, what that looks like, state guidelines, and making sure that we're presenting accurate, up-to-date information to the school committee and to our stakeholders in the community and our teaching and other staff. So that's taken over much of our time appropriately. In addition, been starting a review process of the budget with Ms. Avery so that we're fully on the same page with everything. She's a wonderful resource, and I'm still learning some of those pieces and will continue to go. And again, assessing and just taking in all I can in the assessing process and making sure that we keep the hand on the wheel like we intended, and then we're going in the right direction and reporting to effect. That's what I have for now.
Thank you. Agenda item number 13, to enter into executive session to discuss personnel matters.
Well,
Madam Chair.
12.
Oh, sorry, agenda item number 12, future agenda items. I apologize. Is anyone, sorry?
Yep.
Kieran, Mr. Gutierrez-Collins?
Okay, I got a few. My first one is the pending consideration of my proposal to reform the use of school resource officers in Lewiston Public Schools. Originally scheduled to be considered and decided on July 13th. I would ask our new chair to schedule that vote as quickly as possible. in the interest of resolution for an issue that is dominated community discussion in a lot of ways. I think everybody here understands how passionately many people in our community feel on both sides of that issue. I also want to see a consideration of the suggestion we heard from a member of the public today during public input on the possibility of providing flu vaccines to our students and staff members during the consideration of testing and symptoms and who could be suffering from a fever and sniffles for reasons unrelated to COVID. It struck me as a no-brainer that we would try to minimize the amount of non-COVID illnesses in our schools to make it more likely that symptoms would reflect a COVID diagnosis rather than the flu, which is also a serious illness, but not nearly as serious. I also would like to see the consideration of my climate resolution, first proposed in January and never brought for consideration of the school committee. I'm hopeful that the new chair will take a different approach on that and allow the school committee to work its will on that subject. And finally, I think we need to consider looking at the procedural rules and reforming the method under which items get on the agenda in the first place. So those are my 4 future agenda items.
Ready to comment on that? The procedural rules will have to be a priority because in doing my research over the last week, I've discovered that on March 2nd, this committee voted on procedural rules for the first reading, but COVID-19 shut everything down 2 weeks later and we never had a second reading.
Okay.
So we need to revisit that right away. Ms. Whitlow?
Yeah, we need to look at policy BE, which refers to school committee meetings. It needs to be updated to reflect the amended change to the structure of how often we have our school committee meetings. So if there needs to be a change, that should be brought to our next meeting so that we can have our first reading on that. Also, we need to discuss, I would think, the need to hire more nurses. I wish that lady was here. I think that, I know we've talked about more nurses previously, but now with more stuff to do with COVID, and I think we need more than teachers to observe and take care of these kids. You can't teach and try to be a nurse at the same time. So please put that on the agenda at some point. I guess I would like to have a discussion with the current nurses. I don't know who would be at that meeting, but to see if that's something that we can do with the current nurses that we have. So, and also if we could put on the agenda for the next meeting nomination of vice chair. Because I don't think that we should have that tonight because it wasn't on the agenda. And I don't think it's necessary right now. So.
Thank you. Anyone else with future agenda items? Mr. Poppin?
I'd like to take up the discussion of Longley, the homeless outreach. There was a proposal that was attached to it, creating a subcommittee to evaluate different options there. And I think secondary to that is the whole operation of Longley, where Impact Academy stands in our alternative ed situation over there.
Thank you. I would like to request that we have our first reading of the bullying policy that we had revised at our subcommittee meeting in February, and we haven't had the opportunity to visit that due to COVID-19. I believe that's J-I-C-K? J-C-K, J-I-C-K? Anyone else?
Can I clarify on that last one? What process did that go through?
We met, myself, you.
Yeah. Okay. I was like, I'm involved with this. Yes, it's
and
way in the
We
recesses.
revised it. We were supposed to schedule it for a first reading with the committee, and that never happened because of COVID-19. So we need the first reading on that.
I've got to be very honest. I was not given the documentation for that. So I do not
We can talk
have.
about, we were all in the meeting together before
Okay.
when we did that.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item number 13, to enter into executive session to discuss personnel matters in accordance with MRSA 4056A.
So moved.
Second.
Hoffman, Whitlow. All in favor? We will now enter executive session.